Good evening, everyone. It's another podcast presented to you by SportsKhabri, and today we're talking about Chelsea. Now, Chelsea suffered a 2-0 defeat to Spurs in their last Premier League game. They haven't been performing well since Potter has taken over and since the January transfer window has closed. And now, a lot of people have different views on Chelsea and their approach in terms of recruitment. Let's find out the views of our panelists Rahul Saha, Anshuman Joshi, Yashodhan Nakhare, and Kaustubh Pandey. Rahul, I'll start with you. What are your views on just everything that's gone around Chelsea in the last, say, 6 to 12 months?
Well, it has been a mess ever since, like for whatever reason, like be it, conflict or whether, Thomas Tuchel was not, willing to take up the roles that he wanted to take up. But it all started from there, and it has been a downward spiral since then. Like although like they have recruited they have recruited young and special players on very long contracts who irrespective of who is the manager are, if you look at on the on at them on the surface level, they should, come good at some point given the, longevity of their contracts. However, what they've been doing on the pitch and on the market have been, really messy. And if we have to sum it up as a whole, like I can say, like it has been really horrible for them. And what's more, damning is that like Todd Boehly, brought in Graham Potter with a certain vision in mind that he wanted Chelsea to, move away from the Roman Abramovich era and, go into a certain direction. However, although the philosophy was correct on the surface level, but when you look at Graham Potter as the manager himself, he is not someone who can, stick to a certain philosophy and, nurture his squad and build on it. So that has also, backfired to some extent, as a result of which the new players that have come in, they haven't been able to, gel in. Whatever match you see, there is a lack of cohesion in the Chelsea squad, be it in the build-up phase or in the transition phase or in the final third. So it all stems from all these things. So you just can't point on one single factor. So it is a, sum of all these things: the poor decision made by Todd Boehly and his decision makers, Graham Potter himself on the tactical board, and while he's choosing these personnels on the pitch. So yeah, like it's a tough ask to, and the way this slump has set in, it will be very difficult for them to, drastically get out of it. Like a lot, the way that a lot of things has gone wrong for them, a lot of things also has to go right for them to, get back to at least, let's say, challenging for the European places again, if they stick by Graham Potter.
Right. Anshuman, let's talk about the latest of these issues that's come to light, which is the number of signings Chelsea have made. Is there a was it a wise decision to bring in so many players given the fact that Chelsea already had a big squad and now they have a humongous squad with players on long contracts?
Well, it's never a good idea to buy 25 players at the same time and expect things to work out because we have had plenty of examples in the past where the teams have tried to do that. If I were to pick up a simple example that comes to mind, I would say the time when Tottenham Hotspur sold Gareth Bale for like 100 million pounds and brought 10, 11 players for approximately the same amount, and few of them worked out, most of them did not. And the problem is always that when you are recruiting players, when you are incorporating new players into the team, it's easier to do when there are a handful of new arrivals into a team that is already settled in, and it's much harder to do that when you throw 30 people in the same room at the same time and expect them to work out immediately. So the first thing is that when you are buying so many players at the same time, you're setting yourself up for disappointment in the long run. And the basic thing is that the way things ended for Chelsea last season, this was always going to be a very hard time in the short term and in the long run. What Todd Boehly and the new arriving consortium could have done is to make sure that however hard things were going to be, they could prepare themselves in a way so that things would be less hard, which basically has not happened, because the moment a consortium like Todd Boehly arrives, you need to keep in mind that the near infinite amount of money that was previously coming in from the oligarchy is no longer there. So that is not going to happen. So the investment that Chelsea football club will be getting needs to be sustainable to a certain degree, and the investment coming going back into the club will predicate on the revenue and the success the team is having on the pitch. So the frequency of the investment in the first go was slightly surprising to me, because every time they are spent, especially towards the end of the winter transfer window, because I look at them spending 100 million on Enzo Fernandez. I look at them spending of a lot of this money on earlier in the season on Wesley Fofana, and I'm like, okay, for the first season it makes sense if you are trying to make a statement, but how is this sustainable? Because I cannot see it going on for 2 3 seasons down the line. And if you give your fans an idea that this is how the transfer spending is going to be, then they are going to expect this kind of transfer spending year in year out. And coming to fan expectations, the things that Chelsea fans were inevitably in for this season was culture shock. And by that I mean is that previously things were pretty simple at Chelsea. As long as you are winning, it doesn't matter whether you're Roberto Di Matteo or Carlo Ancelotti. Your pedigree does not matter. As long as you are winning, you have the job. The moment the results stop coming, you're out the door. Simple as that. That cannot be the case anymore, because things need to be realistic. There needs to be a long-term project, given the kind nature of ownership that now sits at the Chelsea Football Club. So these phases where team is not winning, the performances are not coming, this was always going to be a very hard task for Chelsea fans in general. I don't think that things have further been helped by the way Graham Potter manages, and the way the ownership has gone on recruiting all of these players at the same time, because this just adds to the degree of chaos, and it really does not help anyone. Because ideally you would want limited number of signings. Some signings made sense, the likes of Raheem Sterling in the summer, the likes of Kalidou Koulibaly, because you're losing a lot of players in those departments, so some reinforcement makes sense. But then you are missing out on the likes of Rafinha, Jules Koundé, and Barca are not only taking these players off your hands, they are also taking your own players off your hands, and Andres Christensen and Marcos Alonso. So it looks like Todd Boehly is the kind of owner who wants to placate the fans, who wants to appease to the fans, and who wants to seem like a man who is a go getter, who wants to get things done. He's popping into the Twitter spaces of fans when they are imploding after a bad performance. So you look at him and you look at the kind of things that he has wanted to do from the start. I mean, we know it's well reported that he wanted to go after Cristiano Ronaldo as well. Thomas Tuchel said that this is not something that he was on for, which now from this point on we can know for sure was the starting point of where their relationship started to strain. And the decision for sticking with Thomas Tuchel until after the end of the summer transfer window, and the acquisition of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, it doesn't really make sense under any circumstances. And the fact that he stuck with Thomas Tuchel after the transfer window, because if you have decided that he's not going to be your man and you want someone else, you look at Graham Potter, you like Graham Potter, and you want to build with him in the long term, then you bring him in early. If you try to do that, I get the argument that Thomas Tuchel was very very famous with the fans, and so immediately sending him off could have created quite a carnage. Well, Thomas Tuchel's reputation has only soared in those months since he has been sacked and Graham Potter has been at the helm. And this is a culmination of a lot of things. The very type of manager Graham Potter is, and the kind of reinforcement strategy Chelsea has had, which is pretty much a scattergun one. So that was always going to be a problematic one. And I think Rahul has written recently about this. He will probably go into more detail that the kind of manager Graham Potter is. He is one who likes his tactics to be flexible. Now, if you are doing that in a close, controlled environment of Brighton and of Albion, where the club is well run, it's very stable, then that aspect of your coaching is something that can be considered a positive. That okay, you are tactically flexible enough to be able to create different systems. But even at Brighton, the thing that we knew was that tactically, Graham Potter had quite a lot of issues working with his team in the final third and creating goal scoring chances and converting those goal scoring chances. I think in the first and the second thirds, they were quite fluid and quite attractive football, but they did struggle with that. Now at Brighton, you could have said that okay, the quality of players that are coming in are not decent enough. Neil Maupay doesn't seem to be converting goals at the top flight. Danny Welbeck cannot save it long enough. and Dennis Sunda, ever since he moved from Union Saint Gilloise, he's not doing good enough in the Prem as well. So you could say that okay, it's a personal thing. That thing has translated to Chelsea as well. So now instead of being a Brighton issue, it becomes a Potter issue. That okay, you are not able to do that with all of this talent at your disposal as well. And despite all of the issues Chelsea have, insofar as they have brought on too many players at the same time, this is something that now becomes a problem for Potter, because you've gone from working at a very stable club to a club that has barely started, has barely had a clean slate, and there is no sort of stability here. So when you add to that a manager who doesn't have a fixed style of play, that things immediately become very, very weird, and things immediately get out of hand if the results do not start coming. And bottom line is the results. You can talk about playing attractive football and one brand of football and this and that, but at the end it comes down to results. And with the Chelsea fan base, results has been the cornerstone for a very long time, especially with the Chelsea fan base, because they are used to having up and down seasons. We'll win the Premier League one season, we'll win the Champions League one season, the next season we'll end up 5th or 10th, doesn't matter, because we know the manager will be gone, another one will come in, and we'll succeed, and we'll come back to the top. That is not going to happen anymore. Things are going to be a lot more painful in the long run for success to come along. And this step that has taken, bringing Potter on, was not particularly a bad decision in and of itself. But everything else that has happened with Chelsea, you are trying to buy an entire recruitment staff at the same time. Okay, that is understandable. But your dressing room is just full of players that don't know each other. So naturally, that's going to take time. And the thing that we have seen with football is that needs to be played out on the pitch. There is no way to microwave a relationship. You cannot do that with players in real life. You cannot do that anywhere. So that needs to happen out on the pitch. And it is happening out on the pitch. The problem is that it's happening out in such a bad way, and the overall reaction that the fans are getting, that the performance are resulting in, it has created an environment that does not seem sustainable in the long run. A lot of comparisons are being made with the likes of Arteta, with the Arteta Arsenal stick around. There are two things with the Arteta comparison. A, we don't know whether Arsenal would have stuck with Arteta if in the 2020-21 season the fans would have been at the stadium, because of the local fans that are playing at the stadium play a huge part in how the ownership perceives how things are planning out. And it's a good thing. Another thing that with Arteta is that the results were not there, but what he was trying to do was always visible from the first day. So that is something that is not visible with Potter. And okay, you could say that is a tactical flexibility thing, but it does not work in his argument when results are not coming your way. It's just one of those things. So yeah, just all of the decisions that Chelsea have made since the start of the season have resulted in this cyclone, this melting pot of chaos where everything is going wrong. And you cannot look at anything and say, okay, this is the stable thing, because the investment does not seem sustainable, the results do not seem sustainable, the performances do not seem sustainable, the acquisition does not seem sustainable. What Todd Boehly is doing doesn't seem like a stable thing, because we haven't had him long enough to be able to know that. And from this point, having said multiple times that this is a long-term project, if he sacks Potter, which becomes more and more likely with every bad result, you don't really know how to trust Boehly anymore either. So for a Chelsea fan, there is really nowhere to look where you can look at one aspect and say, okay, this something is stable to hold on to. So yeah, a lot is going awry at Chelsea, and there is little to no amount of stability to look at the moment.
Yashodhan, where do you sit on Graham Potter and his appointment at Chelsea? And
Yeah,
whatever he's done so far. Yeah.
I mean, as a Chelsea fan, it has been a tough season. We can all agree to that. And it was shocking when Thomas Tuchel was sacked, but I kind of saw it coming with the way the results on the pitch were as well, because Tuchel was a popular manager amongst the fans, but then in the league, he's always struggled with Chelsea. Even though they've come fourth or fifth, there never was that uh, champion manager which Tuchel presented at the Champions League level. He didn't show that in the league, and of course, Tuchel's known to have issues with the boardroom at his previous clubs as well. So it was kind of coming, and Chelsea came up with Graham Potter, and a lot of fans were. Graham Potter was their first choice if Thomas Tuchel was sacked, and now things have gone different. But I feel that Chelsea should stick with Graham Potter at least till the end of the season. I mean, things have been bad, but then this season is a complete write-off for all of us. The max we can get to is a Europa League position, maybe, but there was a very interesting article by the Athletic yesterday about, is playing the Europa League really the right thing for Chelsea at this stage? Because Chelsea might actually do better if they do not have European football next season, especially considering that we've suffered this once previously when Antonio Conte was manager. We didn't have European football that season, and we ended up winning a league. Now the quality of the squad difference and the chaos is a lot different compared to that one, but this squad will definitely benefit with a preseason with Graham Potter, which Anshuman mentioned that Chelsea did not give it to him because of how they stuck with Tuchel till the for a few games and then sacked him sometime into the season. So there have been a lot of issues, but then I also understand Boehly's point of view, because there was a lot of chaos that Marina and the previous ownership left. I mean, you had so many of your Champions League winning squad players in the final year of contract. There were issues with injuries, with the medical department as well, and scouting had been a big issue as well, because Chelsea's academy was known to produce a lot of talent, but in the previous years, the last 4 or 5 years, if you check the results at the academy level, had also gone down. So we needed a culture shift, but Boyle might have rushed into things. He might have. Rome isn't built in a day, and he's been trying to do that since he's come here. So that's something we believe. Chelsea fans believe that Boyle needs to slow down. Uh, he's got an excellent squad on his board, especially with Christopher Vivell and Paul with Stanley. So these guys are some who have a great track record at the previous clubs, and we believe that they can, change things around here. But the fans need to also understand that this is not the same Chelsea that we witnessed for the last 2 decades, and there is going to be a lot of difference come in this regime, and we have to just take it in. This season, I've written it off completely. I'm just looking forward to seeing how Potter manages till the end of the season. I've been surprised that he's stuck with players such as Ziyech, who he almost sold on the final day of the January transfer window, and even then he's been starting games after that. So these are decisions that kind of come as a shock to all the fans, because you've got young players like Madueke, Mudrik, and yeah, they are going to struggle because they've just moved countries. They've come into a new culture, but Arteta stuck with a lot of young players when they were going through a rough patch. Uh, Players such as Marcus Rashford have played so many games even during those rough patches. So we need to give these players a chance, and Potter needs to sort out from his large amount of players that he has at his bay. He needs to sort out who he needs to keep here the next season, and he needs to take an example from the man who replaced him at Brighton, where De Zerbi, who actually asks players to go and train on their own if he doesn't want them. So maybe it's something Potter could work on that, maybe. And fans are, of course, not happy with Potter because he does not come off as a strong character like previous Chelsea managers have been, especially Thomas Tuchel, Jose Mourinho, Antonio Conte. These are managers with great egos, great characters who, show that authority on the field, even in the press conferences, and fans are attracted to that naturally. So maybe Chelsea fans are losing patience with Potter because he's not showing that. But tactically, I think we've all seen what Potter has done at Brighton. He does like to tingle with his tactics a lot, but then he is a brilliant coach. So it's only a matter of time to see whether he can sail this ship forward or no.
Kaustubh, can Chelsea benefit from a season without European football? It gives the squad a bit more time to understand each other, and without those midweek distractions, they could probably understand and learn a lot more of what the coach wants from the side.
I think I think a lot of it will come down to how Chelsea approach stuff in the summer as well. Because you have this massive squad which can't play together for a lot of different reasons, but also the fact that Chelsea signed a manager in the first place who was an essential mismatch to the sort of ideology or identity that Chelsea wanted to put themselves forward as. Because I don't think Chelsea as an attack or their individual players. I mean, a majority of Chelsea's individual players didn't actually improve under Thomas Tuchel. They only improved as a unit. Because if you look at the last 2 seasons, I mean, the 2 seasons Thomas Tuchel was in charge. I think in one season, Mason Mount was the highest scorer in all competition, and the second one, I mean, I think Jorginho was the highest goal scorer, which already shows that none of the front three or the front four uh, have been excellent as individuals. Or in the second, as a second point, uh, they were not the right profiles in the first place. Because you look at the sort of player Kai Havertz is and the way he played at Bayer Leverkusen. I mean, I think his best season at Leverkusen came in as a right-sided central midfielder, whereas he comes in at Chelsea at the back of half a season post lockdown, where he's played as a striker and everyone thinks he's a striker, where his actual position was always the right sided central midfielder. Same for I think Timo Werner as well. A lot of people forgot about the sort of player that he was, and I think probably Hakim Ziyech was the only player that Chelsea thought, yeah, he's playing in the right position, but he was never really the sort of player that Thomas Tuchel can play with. So I think there's so many issues at hand for Chelsea that um, I'm not sure if even someone like Graham Potter can look at a certain player and say that you're out of my team, because he's a manager. I mean, we've spoken about it already that he's someone who likes to fiddle with formations constantly, be it across games or between. I mean, we've seen him during his stint at Brighton. We saw him fiddling around with formation every 15 minutes. He's someone who's very proactive when it comes to his on-field decisions. If he wants to overpower an opposition midfield, he make sure that they're playing square formation in midfield, which he constantly did against Man United and completely choked United out. So when you have an adherence to this sort of an ideology, I mean, I think ideology is a more hardcore term, but I would use the word philosophy here, where you want to uh, change on the basis of how the opposition is playing, while also having an overarching philosophy. Having a squad of over 30 players never helps. And on top of that, we see, a classic example would probably be, I think, going back to Italy, it's Vincenzo Italiano at Fiorentina. He had a very limited squad, but he had a very complex idea to preach to the squad. And that took him about 1 month. And the players that he had were not, superstars. I mean, they probably had one or two. This is when they still had Dusan Vlahovic. It took him about just 1 month to instill his idea into the team. And I think Graham Potter is someone who, uh, again, he's someone who is similar to what Mauricio Pochettino was when he just left Southampton. Uh, and we've seen Mauricio Pochettino is still probably stuck in that phase where he went to PSG. We saw that he had issues with, a lot of individual players, especially the front three, front four, or, the so-called Brazilian group there. Um, he's had these issues with, I mean, not issues as such, but he can't make the most out of these lofty egos, these lofty superstars. He's more into coaching these younger players, lesser known players, and making sure that they do these double or triple training sessions across 24 hours, and instilling a certain brand of play into them, a uh, certain improving their certain skill sets. Now, Chelsea are not in that position now, and I mean, again, it depends on the sort of identity that Todd Boehly wants to put forward with this club in the months coming forward. But I think, I mean, this is just personally speaking, that Graham Potter is a manager who is best with, say, a side of, I mean, currently the sort of situation that we are in now, he's probably best with a squad such as Brighton's, or maybe someone like Brentford themselves. I mean, or maybe if, say, Arsenal or maybe Liverpool go into a phase where they say, we're not signing superstars, we are sticking to what Spurs were when Mauricio Pochettino just came in, where they had this strong core group of younger players, be it Dele Alli, Christian Eriksen, Harry Kane. They I mean, I think their squad was thin back then at Spurs, which is why Pochettino never really paid too much attention to cup competitions. And I think Potter is still in that phase. I mean, ironically enough, Pochettino is probably still in that phase as well, because his career has not really taken off and he's made some bad decisions as well. But I think, I mean, I tweeted this when Potter was initially appointed that um, Thomas Tuchel himself clearly stated after he left PSG, saying that I hate being a sports politician or sports minister. Whereas he went into a club whose situation was turning into be extremely political, especially when the ownership was changing. And it was no surprise that he left. And I think, even though I think massive respect to Graham Potter, and I'm a massive fan of him, that he's someone who's had these degrees in leaderships, social sciences, which is very rare for a football manager. And he's never had a glittering footballing career either. So, I mean, for someone like that, um, and for someone who wants to preach a very flexible idea of football, having a smaller squad is massively important, because the more players you have, the tougher it will be to impose, 4 or 5 ideas into them. I mean, it's almost like you're getting Chelsea are expecting a fish to climb a tree in this case, which we know can never happen. And I think, uh, and I don't know if Graham Potter can be as ruthless as we want him to be to trim down the Chelsea squad, but he's obviously someone who knows how to make the most of things when it comes to not having European football and making the most of league competitions, and I think even cup competitions, which again is a completely different context to where Chelsea find themselves in, considering the squad that they have. And I think, as soon as, say, if Chelsea finish ninth or 10th or wherever they are right now, we will definitely see a lot of current players turning off. They'll automatically be saying, we're not playing European football and we're playing under a manager who, as per reports, doesn't have the sort of authority that we wanted to have, which apparently Thomas Tuchel had. I think a lot of players will turn off themselves and they will look to seek moves. But I think we're talking about today. But I think in the next couple of weeks, where there is a certain risk of Chelsea actually going below Aston Villa, slipping into the second half of the table, things can actually get worse. And then what happens? I mean, nobody knows. There can be a situation where uh, Todd Boehly goes out there and thinks that Graham Potter has done. He can't be given too much time, because we're seeing that Chelsea have slipped into the second half of the table. And I think Todd Boehly, I think Anshuman mentioned that Todd Boehly is the sort of character who, I mean, probably the right word would be lavish in a way, where I don't think he has too much idea about football anyway. He's someone who has given these massive ideas about the direction in which football should go to, and all of those sort of align. I mean, with American vision. I mean, American vision will be a very unfair term to use in this case, because he is American, so no stereotypes there. But using ideas that align with the Super League, and when you are trying to be a Super League club, or at least come close to being that, there is a very lower chance that you want to give a manager as much time. Although I would love to see Graham Potter be given so much time, but the way things are, I can't even see him fiddling around with the current squad and then using that squad in Europe. Because if you have only one game to play a week and you still have a 30-man squad, there's a lesser chance of you keeping players happy. If you are playing about 2 games a week, you'll have a higher chance of using about 20 players or 18 players. But if you're playing in the Premier League just one game a week, uh, only about 12 players, max 15 players play, or 16 players play. If you're playing in the Europa League, you have a chance of using about 25 players. But again, someone up, say a manager like probably someone like Zinedine Zidane, who I see as someone who can handle that situation right now, can be someone who makes those ruthless decisions. Because a lot of people say that Zidane is someone who has this authority about him. Whenever he walks into a room, his players know that something's going to happen. And the way you read about stuff in the media, whatever is being written, be it unfair or not, Graham Potter does not seem to have that authority, because, as I said, he's a fish being asked to climb a tree. So I don't think having the current squad and not having European football will benefit them. And I think Todd Boehly seeing a lot of his superstars leave is going to hurt his ego a fair bit, because we know how he is.
Yeah, Rahul, do you see Graham Potter being able to manage these big egos in the coming season?
Yeah, firstly, like I will like to disagree on Kaustubh parts on Kaustubh's opinion on Potter having should be benefit from having a smaller squad, because it's a two-edged sword. If you look at his time at Brighton, he was successful because means successful in the sense that his players were able to implement his ideology and his philosophy to the T because he had a smaller squad, right? But Brighton more often than not underperformed and were always languishing in the bottom half of the table because of the smaller squad, because the system was so demanding that the players cannot keep themselves fit throughout the whole season. So this is why that argument of having a smaller squad will ultimately also going to backfire Chelsea if they are to go, if they are going to go that route. As we speak now, Chelsea have currently, I think, if you include the players on loan, they have nearly around 40 or 42 senior teams players, that including the players that have gone out on loan. So if you, let's say if they can, and if you are talking about trimming down a squad, let's say they and if we again go to the extreme, they can at best sell or mutually terminate contracts of let's say 10 or 12 of those players in one single transfer window. You cannot expect more than that, I guess, because otherwise it will really or you can also disrupt the harmony of the squad, because you're still not quite certain like which players you are going to let go, what is their influence and their reputation within the squad. So that's also a big thing that you have to look into when you will be addressing the summer transfer window. Now in terms of Potter, I think more than handling younger players or bigger egos, it is mostly his structure that is not working, which is effectively leading to these players not performing on the pitch. Because you see, the if the players were not to perform on the it is as simple as that. Look at the profile of players themselves. Not and it is not a coincidence that all of them are underperforming at the same time, because let's like the likes of Benoit Badiashile, Mikhailo Mudryk, or let's say Enzo Fernandez, they were doing exceedingly well before coming to Chelsea, and now that they are in this current environment, in this current setup of Grand Potters, they're massively underperforming as a whole. Raheem Sterling, for example, or you can say even like the likes of Mason Mount, who was excellent for the last 2 seasons, haven't been able to perform this season. So all of these basically points to one thing, that the structure and the system that Potter has been trying to implement, it is not working in this way, in this with this squad. So although like we praise him for his flexibility with his tactics, but what he's repeatedly failing to understand is the requirement of his squad. Sometimes there are managers who mold the squad to the requirement of the system, and then there are managers like Carlo Ancelotti who mold their ideology and philosophy to the requirement of the system. So now that Graham Potter is stuck in this predicament, now if he has to get out of this, what he has to do is he has to adapt his own ideologies to the requirement of of the squad that he has at his disposal, and build on it from step by step. Let's say now if like they have like for now their target is to finish somehow this season in the European places, most preferably in the in the Europa League. If they cannot get the Champions League, then after that, then as I said, that's the summer window will basically more will be all on moving out the deadwood than bringing in quality players. They can bring in quality players, and they need they need upgrade in certain areas, like the goalkeeper certainly needs an upgrade because he's a possession based manager, and both Edward Mendy and Kepa Arrizabalaga are not really that good with the build up play when you're playing out from the back. So they will definitely invest in that area. In my opinion, they still need a solution in their right back department. They need another midfielder. Then there's the striker situation that they have to look into. Like Lukaku's loan will be over, then whether Inter will be looking to buy him or not. There's a whole another discussion. So there's a lot of things that they have to look into. But more than squad building, they have to now look at into squad trimming. But again, when you will be trimming your squad, you have to as I said, you have to adapt it. Uh, you have to adapt a philosophy to the requirement of the squad. You just cannot go gung ho and just try to implement what you know and what you what is the best thing that you have at disposal, because the squad can might not be in tune with that, or at least the majority of the player in that squad might not be in tune with that. So yeah, so that is my biggest criticism of Graham Potter, that although he is flexible with his tactical structures, but as a man manager and as a system tweaker, he has not been able to be that adaptable.
Right. Guys, another thing that I wanted to touch upon was the length of the contracts with certain Chelsea players. Anshuman, is there a problem with the length of these contracts, particularly with players like Mudrik or say Abadia Shield, who have about 7 to 8 year contracts? Because if these players do not work out and you want to get them out, would it not become harder to get them out given the fact that they have longer periods on their contracts left?
100%. And the fact that you have asked the question in that way already tells you that we have to take the legal side in this requirement, because this is again a double-edged sword. Why has he given long-term contracts to these players? Because of the amortization, so he can spread the requirement, spread the amount of money that has been paid for these players over the length of the contracts. So you decrease the length of the contract, the year by year expenditure reduces overall. So that is a thing that, okay, you can say, okay, if you are trying to make your investment a bit more sustainable, that is one way to do it. But that has been considered a foul by UEFA, so the rules have already been changed. So if Boli were looking to do that in the long term, that's no longer be allowed to happen. So why do I call this a double-edged sword is because while in a sense this allows you to spread the amount of money you are spending on these players over a longer term, their value will also depreciate a lot of slowly. So my understanding is from this is, if these players do not work out, especially the very expensive ones do not work out in the long term, and you are looking to send these guys away, then the amortization kicks in and it will dictate that not a lot of value has depreciated, but their perceived value will have been depreciated quite a lot more quickly. So you will be looking at a longer amount of a bigger amount of loss than you would have had if you would have had these players for, like, let's say 5 years, because in that case their value would have depreciated as per a 5 year contract much more quickly. So your perceived loss on the matter would have been a lot more lower. But looking at the fact that there are a few players that I've looked at, and the likes of Benoit Badiashile, he has more or less looked quite composed on the ball as long as he has been here. And this is not exactly an exorbitant an expenditure. The likes of Enzo Fernandez and Mikhailo Mudrik are especially the two investment that I look that might turn out to be slightly sour. I think Enzo Fernandez is a fantastic player. I think we saw that with Benfica and with Argentina at the World Cup. Mudrik is a bit more of a player that, at least for me, feels like, okay, lots of talent there, a lot of potential, but I have not seen enough of this player to warrant the kind of price tag that he has been going for. Noni Madueke has been doing it in the Eredivisie for quite a long time, so him going for 25, 28 million pounds makes sense. Enzo Fernandez, again, this is more of a case of Chelsea just going there and saying, look, they essentially held Benfica to ransom. They said we are ready to play the buyout clause. And what we have seen in the past is that once you attach a price tag with these players, it, for better or worse, it does play a part in how these players are then perceived in the long term. And it's not the players' fault directly, because they are not coming out and saying, okay, you sign us for like 100 million pounds. But we have seen this with the likes of Pogba, with the likes of Coutinho, with the likes of Ousmane Dembele, with the likes of Harry Maguire, that a lot of it needs to go right before people can even start considering whether the amount of money that was spent on you was worth it. So, and this becomes a problem for the player itself, because people have higher expectations of you because of the amount that has been spent on you. Whether that is right or wrong is another matter altogether. But the fact is that this is how things are. So these are the two players that I'm in principle worried about. Otherwise, the amortization is something that, okay, he was able to do while he had the chance, but he again triggered UEFA into bringing in rules for it. So that is no longer happening. So, which again brings an interesting point of discussion into place as to how do Chelsea go about their recruitment process over the next 2-3 years. And the why the whole discussion becomes a lot more speculative for us is because we don't really have any precedent to go on. Like Boehly has been in this is not really his sport, so he is entering a new sport. He has been in Bailey a few months. The recruitment has been scattergun. The dismissal of Tuchel and the appointment of Potter is not enough of a sample size for us to be able to ascertain as to whether there is a pattern emerging here. He has already said that Potter is his long-term guy, so if he sacks him, inevitably we again are thrown into another different quagmire as to, okay, what does that make of Todd Boehly? So what we can see is speculate with what little we have on our hands and point to the different dangers and problems that this will pose for Chelsea in the long term. And then, yeah, we can just look at how things can get more and more worse. As far as the amortization thing is concerned, there are two players in particular for whom Chelsea need to be a bit more precarious, bit more thoughtful regarding with their transfers working out in Mudryk and Fernandes. The rest, I think, should be more or less fine. And if you are ready to be able to absorb those kind of losses on those player sales for somewhere down the line, it's fine. If you were a nation state coming in with a sports washing project, that would have been more feasible for you. For Todd Boehly's consortium, it's not that's not the case. So again, that will be an interesting thing to see whether if these players decide to move on, or if Todd Boehly decides these players need to be moved on, or some kind of stalemate occurs, what happens, how they act with each other in that regard, and if Chelsea are to sell them, how they sell them. So again, lots of speculative things to talk about, and yeah, just can just look here and talk about what potential situations can be.
Yashodhan, coming back to you, just wanted to know whether you feel that the price tag on certain players, like young players like Mikhailo Mudryk and Enzo Fernandez, is it weighing too much on their shoulders, or have you seen enough from them to say that, okay, you know what, they're adapting? I can see that there is raw talent and there's some good talent there, and it'll take some time for them.
Well, we've seen a bit of Mudryk. He's not really looked that comfortable since coming in, but I won't put the price tag on him to say that he's been bad or something in these opening days at Chelsea. It's more been about the system that he's put in, about the chaos, because the entire team's struggling. Now, initial few games when Mudryk was playing, he didn't receive the ball as much. There again was the whole debate between fans about is Kukurea, is Chilwell a better suited left back when Mudryk is playing, because Mudryk likes to cut in. You need an overlapping fullback with him, which Kukurea is not as compared to Chilwell. But these things do play on your mind, but I don't think that's been the case for Mudryk, especially because of the tactical problems that have been at Chelsea and Graham Potter. It's been, you cannot single out a player like Mudryk in this situation, and he showed us a glimpse of what he could be in the Liverpool game during his debut, but since then I've seen barely like one or two dribbles from him where he's beaten his man, and he's not played enough for us to make a judgment yet. He has a lot of raw talent, but that was all we could see at Shakhtar. So we do not really have anything at Chelsea to compare about him. With regard to Enzo Fernandez, I think we've seen people have seen him at the biggest stage, and even at Chelsea since he's come in, he started almost every single game, and he's shown us glimpses again, and he's shown us a lot more than Mudryk, because of course you are in the midfield, you are seeing a lot more of the ball. Now Enzo has struggled a bit because he's been playing as the number 6 or the Jorginho role that we had, and that hasn't really worked out because he is not that kind of player. You need, had we kept Jorginho, I think Enzo would have been a much better signing, at least for the initial 6 months. We've given him a lot more responsibility playing that anchor role in midfield, especially with Kante out as well, and Kovacic not really being fit enough or inconsistent with his play. And so there have been struggles. Now, let's look at the partners that Enzo has had in midfield. He's played with Kovacic, Loftus-Cheek, Gallagher, even Mount in one of the games. So there's been so much chopping and changing in the front, in the entire team, that you've not given these players enough time to, like make their mark. And the price tag comes way much later. We can put that aside and just look at the initial problems that are on the field first. So Enzo will definitely come good. I think with Kante now coming back to fitness, it is something fans are waiting for. But again, Kante is also not a player who is known to, sit. He's not the anchor. So how Potter plays with those two in midfield will be an interesting thing to see. But again, the question now comes in: should Chelsea buy a defensive midfielder to, help Enzo Fernandez really, get his potential out? So that's something Boehly and company, the consortium, can think about in the summer. But for now, I'd say Enzo's shown us glimpses of why no player in the world, in my opinion, is above the market price of 100 million except Mbappe, in my opinion. But Enzo Fernandez has shown us why he's gone for that amount, especially after the World Cup. And Boehly wanted to make that statement signing, and that's the reason he's here and for that particular amount. So it's only time will tell us, but too early to judge about Mudrik. And Enzo, it's more about giving him a partner to, finally unleash his potential.
Right. Costa, will come back to you for the final say. We just wanted to know, what do you think the expectations from Chelsea fans should be realistically for the season? Whether they should aim to finish in the top 5 or 6, or is that even possible? Is that something that they should expect this season?
I mean, ideally, Chelsea fans should consider the season to be a write-off, pretty much like Man United's previous season, because I mean, it was chaotic. There was disturbances from the dressing room, and the media was leaked a certain amount of information, which is what I think is happening at Chelsea now. Because when you have information in the English media that certain players are not happy about the manager and the way he is managing it, it shows that there are certain people at the club. Not, I mean, I'm not saying it's the players. This could be someone from the staff, someone who's working in the other departments of the club, be it the communications department or the marketing department. But there is a possibility that it could be someone close to the player, someone who knows, uh, who's working closely with the manager on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. So I think um, it's if Chelsea don't end up winning the next 2 or 3 games, that situation could become much more toxic than it is. And once it becomes that toxic, I think it should be a write-off. You can't expect a manager to turn things around. I mean, if Potter does, due credit to him, it's a completely revolutionary thing to do. But I think, and I mean, another silly thing which Chelsea sort of thought it could work out is that there's a reason why clubs don't sign players in January. It's that they don't have preseason, they don't have a settling in period. They just have to come in and play sometimes a completely different brand of football in a new country, while playing in stadiums they've never played in before. Because in a lot of parts of Europe, you have stadiums where fans are located so further away from the pitches, and it becomes a completely new experience for players. So a lot of players coming in. I mean, I'm not talking about Noni Madueke here because he's played in England before, but a lot of other players who've come in. You need to consider the fact that they were not bought in the summer, and there's always a challenge for them to join in January and make a mark right away. Which is why we see Marcelo Bielsa absolutely hating the idea of signing players in January, because he knows that his ideas are not easy to preach. And I mean, we know Marcelo Bielsa half the times considers his players to be robots who need to be running around throughout the 90 or 95 minutes. And I think that's a footballing basic which Chelsea got wrong. I mean, Todd Boehly and his people got wrong, and they expect a manager completely um, who's completely from a different background to simply go out there and make those changes and make sure that uh, he adapts to the demands of the players, whereas his whole career has been about having a higher structure, a higher system in place, and then having a tactical system which changes on the basis of that, which is how he operates, which is very unlike someone like Mikel Arteta or Eric Ten Hag, who are very good at changing their higher structures and then, having largely the same formations or rotating between one or two formations, whereas Graham Potter is completely different. So I think if Potter turns this around, it's going to be I mean, even when he retires 20 years down the line, it's going to be one of the biggest achievements of his career. But that's the scale of the task we're talking about. I mean, and I expect this situation to get toxic further. I mean, I don't want to, because I've been a massive admirer of the way Graham Potter has risen through the ranks to reach where he is. Ideally, I think he should be an inspiration for a lot of us out here, and not just out here. I mean, a lot of people out there as well, because he's someone who's done something we can only dream of. I mean, we were talking about Newcastle United a couple of days ago, and I described Eddie Howe to be someone I look up to, because he's someone who's done what a lot of football manager players can't even do. I think Graham Potter's done quite the same thing. So, I mean, there needs to be a massive amount of respect for what Graham Potter has achieved in his career, be it in England or otherwise, especially because we don't see a lot of English managers doing it. They're pretty much stuck in their own footballing framework, doing a lot of work across divisions and sometimes not even making the Premier League. Whereas this is a manager who's an absolute pioneer in that regard. So there has to be a certain amount of respect for what he's done in his career as well, which is what I don't like about the way media has treated him, which is quite annoying. But if he turns this around, it's going to be a much bigger achievement than what he's achieved in the past. That is saying a lot.
Only time will tell whether Potter can turn it around and whether Chelsea fans can expect European football next season. Until then, I mean, until the season comes to a close, we'll have to wait and we'll have to just wait and watch. Thank you so much, guys, for joining today. This was a lot of fun.